So this tutorial is about making your character jump. There's a few things that we're going to need to set up on the character to make this happen. Well, to make it happen efficiently, because basically one of the problems you have when you put in jump scripts is the character will be able to double jump, so he can jump in the air twice. And so I'm going to show you how to make it jump and to solve that problem all in one go. And you can follow along to this tutorial. All the code to do that is in this tutorial, which is in the link below on the I Code with Them Medium. So please clap for the articles if you like them, it helps them to be discovered. Right, so without further ado, let's get started. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the script. We're going to add a rigid body. So make sure you've got a rigid body. I already have one up there. This is really important because to make the character jump, we're going to have to apply force in the up direction, and we do that by applying force to its rigid body. So your character, to just double check all the things, the components your character's got, it should have an animator, it's got transform. In the move script, it's got a place for the rigid body, and then we've got the actual rigid body here. We also need to have a capsule. Why do we need the capsule? Because we don't want it to fall through the floor. And then we have the rigid body, and we connected the rigid body to the script by dragging it into there. And that gives your character physics. So we want to add a jump force variable after that. So we'll put our jump variables here. These are our movement variables, which we did to make the character move properly. And these are our jump variables. And the first one we're going to add is a public float jump force. The jump force is how high you want to jump. So if you tweak this, you'll be able to make him jump higher, of course. The next bit is a little bit tricky. So there's a couple of things we need to set up. So to know, we're going to create two public properties that I'm going to copy and paste in here from the article. One is a public transform ground check, and one is a public layer mask called ground layer. So this is a transform or a collider that basically his feet. We're going to add a collider for his feet. And this is a layer mask which we're going to assign to a certain layer, so we know what is the ground. How do we do that? Right. Well, we want the terrain to be the layer. So if I select terrain after it's reloaded the script, and then I'm going to go to this layer drop-down menu, and I'm going to add a new layer, or I've already added the layer. So I'm going to go to terrain. I go to layer. See, now I've already added a layer called ground, but you need to add a layer, and then you'd need to write the name of the layer in there, call it ground. Then you need to go back to the inspector of terrain, and you need to set the layer to be ground. So now that is the ground. We can identify that as the ground. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a little box that this box is his feet to detect whether or not he's standing on the ground, and only if he's standing on the ground can he jump. So if I go here, I right click and I create empty, and we're going to call that ground check transform. Now this is an empty game object, and we're going to add a component to it. We're going to add a box collider component to it, and we need to adjust the size of that. So if I just zoom in there, so if I focus on that and I just move down a bit, I'm going to click on this edit collider button here, and I'm going to shrink it so it's the size of his feet. And I think we need to just move it down a little bit, and then edit this collider. There's a little, you probably can't see it, but you see these luminous dots, they indicate the sides. So this, I know that if I drag here, there's one right in the middle there, but you can't quite see it as obviously as that one. But I could shrink these ones to make them a bit smaller as well. But I know if I drag the middle one there, and then I've got this his feet there. So I'm going to make sure that this box is just extend a little bit past his feet, and then we know that this box is going to collide with the ground. And then I'm going to maybe make it a bit small over here as well, so just like that. Doesn't really matter too much. It's just more about, is it detecting when he's on the ground? So this is our ground check transform. So if we go back to the move script, which is in our character, we've got these two, we should have those two empty game objects that we just added. If I save that and I go back to here, we should have two empty game objects, and we're going to drag the ground check transform into one of them, and then we're going to drag the we're going to set the layer that we want to detect as the ground to be anything with that ground layer. So you see here now we've got these two empty things. So I'm going to drag that little box collider that we created on his feet into ground check transform, and I'm going to set ground layer to be ground. So that's everything you need to do. It's a little bit complicated to set up, much easier to watch in the video than just follow the instructions. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go into the code and create a function called jump. We like functions because they make our code neater. I only need to call jump here, and then we're going to write that function below. It's going to be called a jump. It's going to take no parameters, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a boolean called isGrounded, and isGrounded is going to be either true or false. And there's, in the physics engine of Unity, there's something called array casting. You might want to look up what ray casting is. Basically, it's a way of like kind of firing out imaginary lines from something and seeing whether they interact with something. And it's quite an efficient way of detecting an object. You could use ray casting in other instances, like you could have an enemy that could ray cast out, and if it detected an enemy within its visual sphere, then it would go to it. So yeah, have a look at ray casting. You should use this sparingly. It can be quite an expensive operation. What do we want to do in the ray casting? Well, there's a couple of parameters we've got to pass in. We've got to pass in the ground check transform. We've got to pass in the position of that ground check transform, which is going to be his feet. And then we're going to say what direction the ground check, the raycast is going. It's going vector down, vector 3 dot down. And then we're going to say how long, how big that raycast is. And then we're going to say what layer are we looking for? Well, we're looking for the ground layer. So if it interacts with that ground layer, it's going to be true, and we know we're going to be on the ground. But really look up the documentations for ray casting. I'll just open up that page, ray casting Unity. It's quite interesting. It's worth having a read of it. Let's go to that now. Just have a little look. You get better as a developer by looking things up. So we've got these three things that we've just entered in: origin, the start of the ray involved, the direction of the ray, the max distance the ray should check for collisions, and then the layer mask. So what we're actually looking for. And what does it say about it? Yeah, well, you can read about that. That's basically what we've just created. I'll put a link to that in the video below. So right, yeah, we've got this raycast to take the ground. Then we're going to need to check using an if statement. Well, first we're going to check, has jump button been pressed? So jump button is something set in the input library, and it's just called jump, and that is assigned to certain keys. So it's assigned to like the space bar, the trigger button, and we're going to look for get button down, and we're going to look for whether we push the jump button down, and then we're going to check is grounded. And so if the jump button's been pressed and we're on the ground, so if they're both true, then what we need to do is we need to apply a force to our object's physics, our rigid body, and we're going to apply it in the up direction. So we're going to do rb.add force. Dot up, multiply it by jump force, And then we're going to do force mode dot impulse. So there are different types of forces you could use. Again, go and look up add force on rigid body and understand the documentation on that. But there are several different types of forces. Have a play around with the different forces. So here are some of them. So we've got force mode. Let's go all the way down to the bottom, look at the documentation. So force mode impulse, let's click on that. It describes what it is. Apply an impulse force instantly with a single function call. So what other force modes are there? Look at some of the examples, and they've got descriptions below. Acceleration, impulse, velocity change. So yeah, that's force mode. Again, I'll put a link to that below. So we're going to apply that rigid body force there. Then we're also going to set the animator to be jumping. Animator dot set bool. Which parameter are we going to set? We're going to set the jump underscore b, and we're going to set that to true. So he's going to move his animation state from being idle to jumping. And then we need an else. So if that is not true, if we let go of the button, perhaps, let's just do an else. And basically, we're going to set the, if that's not true, we're going to set that state back to false. So every time the update function is called, it's going to call jump. It's going to check whether it's on the ground. If we are on the ground, we're pressing jump. It's going to jump by applying a force in the up direction. It's going to set the animation to true. If that's not true, we'll set the jump animation to false. And that is basically all we need to do to make your character jump. So now let's go reload the code and see if that works. Maybe some extra things I said you could try out once you've got this working is try some different types of force modes. So like I said, go to the link below for that Unity docs and see if you can try like a different force, like where were the forces? That was ray casting, acceleration force, velocity change force. What would happen if you applied a different force? Right? Try and play with that. Change the jump force. How high can you make your character go? How high do you want him to go? That's completely up to you. It's your game. Oh yeah, error, move scripts, line 67. Else, jump. Move script line 60. Oh yeah, we did put semicolon, save, so save that, go back to there, let it reload, and then we'll see if this is working. So once this is working, you could then move on to the next tutorial after this, which is introducing an enemy and also introducing you. So we're going to create an enemy that's going to move around and follow you. And then we're going to make the enemy have a collider so that you can shoot him and it will trigger his death animation. And then the one after that is going to be updating the score based on whether or not you've hit someone, so you can get points. And then you basically have everything you need to do for a game. You have, you've implemented movement, you've implemented different like jumping, running, and you've implemented how to detect something hitting a collider of another object, or hitting perhaps your collider and killing you, because enemies could shoot at you. So right, here we are. So now I go walking, running, jumping. Now if I try and jump in the air, it won't let me do it. It just falls down. Maybe there could be a fall animation as well. And there we go. If I'm running and I jump, it goes to a running jump. So obviously it's not completely perfect, but it's almost perfect. It's a lot better than it was before in the first tutorial. So yeah, and like the video, comment below what you think about it. Follow the tutorial and link below. Also look at the other files, like to do the Unity docs.